Welcome to the Rhonda Grant Show with your host, Rhonda Grant. If you believe that there is more to life than what you see right now and you want to find out more, listen in as her guests share their journey and their extraordinary experiences. Now, here is your host, Rhonda Grant.
Welcome. We are so pleased that you have joined us. It is here that we will uncover if my guest has had extraordinary discoveries in her life. The theme song for the Rhonda Grant Show is Sun on the Water, composed and performed by John Park Wheeler. My guest today is Dr. Anneli Driessen, who is a C-level Master Certified Coach, Clinical Counselor, Spiritual Healer, Ordained Metaphysical Minister, author and scholar of metaphysical and practical philosophy for over 35 years. Anneli is the founder and CEO of the International Metaphysical Academy in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, which she established 11 years ago. Its mission is to facilitate high-level spiritual education for consciousness expansion through critical thinking, applied knowledge, and personal responsibility and love. Join me in welcoming Dr. Anneli Driessen. With such a vast background in the metaphysical, did you experience these types of abilities as a child? And if so, were you encouraged to develop these gifts?
When I look back to my childhood, I had already very early experiences when I was in kindergarten to be drawn to healing and to education. And I did this with my dolls. At the time I didn't know it, but I built my own little school, my fantasy school with all my dolls, and I had a hospital. And so I went to the neighbors and picked up little dolls that had lost their arms and legs, and I put them all in little beds, and I wrapped them up and put Nivea cream on them and things like that. And I even didn't realize that some dolls without a head, they could not live anymore. So even if they had no head, I would just put them in the hospital beds for healing. So I didn't know it at the time, but throughout my life, I know I was preparing myself for this academy. I had many experiences, and my calling did not happen until about 20, almost 30 years ago. And that's when I got involved with the early beginnings of the International Metaphysical Academy. And when I look back at my education, it didn't feel like it at the time, only when you introduce me and read all this, and I think, wow, it's quite a lot. You have a lot of years and you just do what you need to do. It doesn't seem like so much. And so I know that I was guided to prepare with my skill sets and with my way of putting things together, translating from German language into English, that it all was a preparation for what I'm doing today.
Well, that's wonderful. And is it that brought you to Canada, or what did bring you to Canada?
That's another interesting question. What brought me to Canada was actually me marrying a Canadian. Now, the marriage did not last very long, but I stayed here. But something interesting happened also, which I remembered. And I was still in kindergarten when I announced to the kindergarten teacher that when I grow up, I will live in Canada. I had no idea about Canada. I had heard it somewhere. I didn't know where it was, what it was, but I announced it as though on some level I knew. And now I know I was guided here to bring the information that I have had the privilege to access through a world-class number channel who lives now in Austria, to translate the new information and to make it a big part of the Academy's curriculum. And I know I was guided here, and I know that because of many other events that happened. And that is something that I agreed to do before I came here. So I know that, and that is not something I can convince anyone with. I just know for me it's true. And I feel tremendously honored and privileged that I do what I do. And it is such a gift and such a blessing to do something that you know is worthwhile and can save many people's lives.
Yeah, you're making such a difference in people's lives.
Yeah, and I just need to grow. Now it's time for me to go global. The pandemic has been one of the most terrifying things for me, but also one of the greatest gifts, because now I have been attracting people from all over who can manage during their time zone to be part of the Academy program. And that's what I'm doing. So I'm very, very active with the C-suite. I'm very active with a number of networks and individuals to convince them, to attract them, to invite them to do this very comprehensive program, which is really a 5-year program, 5-year study program.
Mm-hmm. For our listening audience, are there certain signs and signals that they should pay attention to know if they have these special abilities, and that they should increase them or develop them?
Everyone is different. Everyone's conceptual apparatus is different. And so what I would like to encourage people is to learn what they can pay attention to in their life. And it could be through a special teacher or a special book or a special incident. It could be a very happy one. It could be a very challenging one. You're very well aware of, as I understand, of near-death experiences, for example. Mm-hmm. But there could also be other things. There could be suddenly a big award that leads you into something that is really important to do or continue doing. It could be a lot of things. One of the suggestions I do have is to practice meditation. Meditation or prayer, any kind of practice that allows people to get into stillness and get into their inner world. And that can be done in many different ways. We don't need to sit in a funny way, or we don't have to, necessarily even close our eyes. It can happen while we do the dishes, while we do gardening, while we go for a walk, where we just are very present within ourselves about what's going on. And so often then we do get answers. We may get the answers as ideas, or we may get answers as sudden feelings or emotions, or we may get answers in very different ways. Suddenly we get a phone call that's really important, or we have an experience of telepathy with someone. There are multiple ways to help us to figure out, or at least ask the question, is there any deeper meaning? And sometimes there is, and sometimes there isn't. We have to also learn to distinguish. And oftentimes when we just follow those signals, those messages, we are led to our next step in our development or in our journey. And so it's definitely there. Our intuition connects us with spirit guides, or with protective spirits, or with what most people refer to as angels. And there is value in that, in exploring it. And there's also value in exploring what is fake. Sometimes, Rhonda, I encounter people who get into a sort of romantic type of spirituality, a feel-good spirituality. And that may be dangerous. It may be misleading. And it may take people away from responsible action, because sometimes spirituality can be an escape. And so it requires a fair amount of knowledge and self-reflection and thinking to trust the connection that we have with the spiritual world.
How would a person recognize telepathy? I mean, we hear these types of words all the time, but sometimes people just don't know, what would that feel like in my body if I was having an experience of telepathy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for example, I had this just the other day where there's a lady, she's 95 years old, and she's not my mother, but she feels like she is my mother.
Yes.
And we have this really loving connection. And more than at least 5 times just in the last 4 weeks, I knew like a few moments before the phone rang that it was her. And so I shared it with her the other day, and she was just really startled. And she said, "You know what? I have actually the same thing." So there is some sort of a mental, spiritual, or soul connection that communicates with each other just very quickly, and that's what happens. There are other types of telepathic connections, and they can be with animals. I don't know if you ever had an animal, but we had a dog, and it was like we could read each other. It was quite amazing. And, that is another type of telepathy. And there are many others. It's just a very interesting thing to discover. Like, for example, I had a dance teacher in Germany, and she did not know. I traveled quite frequently to Germany in my life, once or twice a year. And she had a little store. She was an artist and a writer, very mystical woman. And I know now we had a past life connection. I didn't know it at the time. But I would walk into her store, and she would look at me and say, "I knew you would come today." And there was no way she could even know I was in Germany. So that was a very interesting thing. And it was so normal for her. It wasn't even a big deal. She wasn't even surprised. And so those are examples of telepathy.
Yes, and they're excellent examples, actually, that people can actually start thinking about and say, "Oh, yes, I've had that," and sometimes it's just a recognition and putting the correct name to it, because intuition is different than telepathy.
Absolutely.
But when you talk about go in, like your inner world, where is into the inner world? Where is that?
That's a very good question. Again, that would be different for everyone. The most simple way I can explain it is that you find yourself being very still. Closing your eyes does help, and just focus first on your breathing, on your rhythm, how your body is breathing you without any effort. And then you go into sort of a dreamlike state, and allow things to come forward. And there could be images, there could be sounds, there could be a voice, or there could be an idea. And it's a very peaceful process that we can do. And oftentimes through that, we find not only a great deal of inner peace and connect with our trust and faith in life and the universe and God. It is also a place where we often access important information, which we refer to sometimes as intuitive guidance or intuitive insights. So that is a very helpful practice to do, because primarily as humans, I believe we are outer directed and not inner directed. And part of the great awakening that is happening during the pandemic, where we are so challenged to deal with the changes and with the fears that are there, and also with making decisions about faith and about being proactive. It's just a major opportunity and a disruption and chaos, really, to connect with our inner self and our inner world, and to find the deeper confidence that we have access to as individuals, if we seek it. It is definitely there. And, oftentimes it's very helpful to consult with a therapist or with a spiritual educator or with a spiritually knowledgeable person of some sort to get some assistance in how to do that, so that we live through this fear, let it totally go, and reach that place of inner calm and trust and joy. And so I just want to clarify also, Rhonda, when I mention the word God, I do not necessarily refer to a religious God who sits, somewhere on the clouds and punishes us. There are so many definitions of the term that I like to just, qualify it and say, for me, it's something that I cannot really define. I just know that this is something that is beyond words. It is, if I try to determine it, it would be like a creator, or all that is, or profound universal energy, order. All of this combined and more is something that I know that is an overall leader or purpose creator of all life. And I know that exist. And so I just want to clarify, when I mention God, that I may not just turn off people and say, oh my God, I'm out of here. This is not something I want to listen to.
Well, I mean, there are people who associate the word God with religion and not spirituality. And there's such a shift in human consciousness, and it just seems to be picking up. And the pandemic has encouraged it. And so people are being careful with what they say and want to define that it's not about religion, it's about the actual creator. And we are used to using the word God. And I like the word spirituality, but I also revert back to God. And I think that people who are suffering in different ways, this is the first thing that they call on God for help and for comfort, especially when things are not good in their life. And that could be many different things that we don't have to cover all of those things. But I'm glad that you clarified that, because that was easy just to brush over, wasn't it? And the listening audience, I mean, many people are religious and that is their God, and many people are spiritual and they still refer to God. But there's many different parts of the world refer to God in a different way. And
I support that too. Religion has a great purpose, and many people have an anchor through the things that they learn through religion. So I'm definitely not against religions. But I also know that we have, as you said, a growing number of individuals who say, well, maybe not everything in this religion is timely anymore for me, or is comprehensive enough. And they go for their own search, and they explore different avenues and different teachings, and maybe do even comparative religions, which is something I highly recommend, which is also part of the Academy's program, so that people do both. They appreciate the different ways of accessing this gigantic, loving, enormous force, whatever, is the, for simplicity reason, again, we refer to it as God.
yes.
But they also see that maybe some of the scriptures need to be carefully interpreted, because they may have gone through not only translation changes over the centuries, but also may be interpreted in different ways. And so critical thinking and education, these are the two things that are really, really important in the Academy's program. And everything is done very, very respectfully. I have been attracting people of different religions, and I encourage them, if there is something that is too much out of the box thinking, to just put it on a shelf and revisit it later. We are totally without dogma, without promoting any kind of religion or anything like that. It's very, very open and respectful and inclusive, because I learned early in life, and that's really interesting, that, and I was a teenager then at that time, that I realized when I had exposure to different religions, which was phenomenal. I was incredibly fortunate to travel a lot. By the time I was 28, I was in 36 countries.
Wow.
And I saw, I was in a mosque. I was in Turkey. I was in a Buddhist temple for several days in Tokyo. And I, had exposure to different spiritual beliefs. And I thought, if there is an all-loving God, He would not distinguish, whether you're, or
Exactly.
And I learned that early on, and it, again, looking back, there were many incidences in my life that prepared me to do what I do. And I just realized that God must be something so big, and we only have very little access to the magnitude of this phenomena. And that if it is true that everyone talks about God as being loving, then He's inclusive. So we have all access to that. But it is like someone told me, like a diamond. Everyone has a little facet of a diamond. And we don't have the whole thing yet, but I really know that after our transition, we will have access to that.
Yes. And one of my favorite words this year is the word inclusivity. And I'm hearing that you're saying that as well. It's all inclusive.
Mhm.
And I really like that. So when we talk about going within or the inner world, is it the same as being present, or can you help the listening audience know the steps of of becoming present and how to stay in that frame of mind and be mindful throughout the day?
God, it's very difficult to do. As I said, we are mostly auto-directed when we are busy, we're doing stuff, and we are not in a meditative state. If we can do that all day, I'm not sure if we actually can. Because we have things to do, right? And so we focus on, an article, or we focus on, I don't know, something that needs to be done. We need to do laundry or something. We focus on something very specific, which is, we are being auto-directed. But I do know, and I just know it from personal experience, with some regular time out during the day, and it could be, meditation or just sit quietly somewhere, we can increase the moments of presence. And the moments of presence, in my understandings, are moments where I'm on high alert and I'm high inner calm. It's sort of a combination of that. It's a very beautiful place to be. And I give you an example of something that I experience sometimes. I have a few clients that I meet with online, and before I meet, I get into this place of getting very grounded, and I ask for guidance and presence to be of optimal service, of optimal help, and to not have any judgments in my way that are pretty normal to have, and to just work with this individual from a place of very deep listening and deep presence. And it's a dance. It's a dance between hearing, feeling, making judgments, letting them go, moving forward, and then getting more new information, which form again new judgments. So it's a dance, from my understanding, of being present and thinking. So
That's
does it make
beautiful.
sense how I explain it?
That is beautiful. I have never heard it explained like that. But it is a dance, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's again something that can be practiced. Some people may be born with an exceptional ability to do that. You may have heard about indigo and crystals, and there are some adult crystals who are capable to have a natural ability to listen very deeply and to be very present and to have other sources of information operating simultaneously. It's a gift. Not everyone has that, but I do believe it can be learned. It can be acquired to some degree.
hmm And you said something just a little while ago, and I just wanted to explore it just a little bit more because I don't understand it. I haven't heard of this term, but you talked about romantic spirituality. And how would I recognize that?
Yeah. Well, it's when I said sometimes people escape into spirituality, it's that there's a denial of that there are other forces operating as well. It's just like evil doesn't exist, and all I want to do is live in love and light. And there is an escape mechanism, because what often people don't know is that the dark side also has light, and it can be very deceiving. So part of our life is to learn to discern between positive and negative forces. And if we just are in denial of those, we can get really trapped. I give you an example.
Okay.
I had a lady in my class starting. She started early in 2020, and because we addressed issues that are also going on right now in this world, which, I mean, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to know there's a lot of evil going on as well.
Mm-hmm.
She suddenly emailed me and sent me that, this is all negative, I'm just going to be a healer now. And she moved to a little island, and I'm only working now with love and light. I don't want to have anything to do anymore with you and with, your information and so on. And so I just gave her one phone call, because I don't push people. It's free. If people do not want to continue or anything like that, which happens very occasionally, then I might inquire why, but I will not use any manipulative type of process to get them back, because I do believe in free choice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I now know, and I knew it at then, that if people escape into this sort of love and light only kind of thing, they often wind up in a very deep depression. In one of the cases that I know is the woman, she was not part of the academy, but very, very involved in healing and spirituality and all this. And she attempted twice suicide. She was just rescued in the last little moment, and she got into a very, very deep depression. And so that can happen. And unless they have the fortune to have some help to get through this, and to gently rebuild their inner confidence, their confidence in their own spirituality, they may just not survive, and they live a horrible life of depression and loneliness. And so that would be an example that I could share with you. There are some 2 cases that I've experienced recently.
That's too bad. And is it that when people are going through this spirituality or awakening or enlightenment, that they need to be around like-minded people so that they uh, stay grounded?
It really helps. When we have a community, it really does help to feel supported, to feel understood, to feel being listened to. It really does help. There are few individuals historically who went into isolation and had, great insights and discoveries, but this is rare. Buddha was one of them, and there are other individuals whom we don't know. Some people get it only through reading and through journaling. But to have a community, even if it's just a few people, where you can share what you're experiencing, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, it really helps to validate who you are and where you are at this point in time in your life. So I highly do recommend it. And one of the things that we have in the academy is, because we have such very different people from all walks of life.
Yes,
over
wonderful.
time, they build such a strong sense of love and respect for each other, and they're lifelong friends. That may not mean that they have dinner, every week together or so, but if someone needs anything, even years later, you can call on someone and the connection is instantly there. It's a very intimate, very edifying experience to be in a group of like-minded people and knowledgeable people as well.
Yes, I would think that it would be. I know that a lot of people have spiritual journeys that it feels isolating because they don't have someone that they know of that are going through what they're going through, and the enlightenment that they're experiencing, because there's so many different levels of enlightenment. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. We are all different. All of us here on this planet, we have a different connection to the divine. We experience it differently, but we can share some things with someone. And unfortunately, as you may know, many times we cannot share it within our own families, not with our spouse, not with our children, because there is not the connection, is not the antenna. So we have, or the resonance. And so we have to look for someone to share it with, and something like us in the academy, that it's possible to have that. But it's also possible in other ways. There are metaphysical coaches, there are metaphysical counselors, they may not be all that knowledgeable, so you have to look, you have to interview them, you have to find out what's their background, what's their belief, can I trust them? And it may require a little bit of searching. But again, thinking and reflecting as well. It's very easy when someone is vulnerable to just gravitate to some guru or some person who may be somewhat questionable. And there are many out there as well. There are many people who call themselves mediums who may not be a medium, who may be at best very sensitive or have different types of skills that a channel can have. And one of the things, for example, we cover in the academy is that there are many different types of mediumship and channels and sensitives, and how to distinguish the difference so that we can make the best connection and the best use of those people we are in contact with.
Mm-hmm. And that's where a lot of people go for answers. Mm-hmm. I think. And over the years, I'm trying to think of the name of the person. It wasn't a medium, but it was a fortune teller, mm-hmm. Type of fortune teller. And I guess there's good and bad in everything. And sometimes people are getting incorrect information, mm-hmm. And they're paying for it. And sometimes it's not good. It's very upsetting to people. The best person that I went to was many years ago. I was in my early 20s, and she was the most correct person that's ever read me. And of course, I haven't had anybody read me for very years and decades, but that woman was right on track, and she was so unassuming. And she'd been doing it for a long time. But there's also people who read tea leaves, and different types of things.
Yeah, for many, this is an entry into the understanding of the invisible world, which
right.
It has value. I'm not saying these are not good, because people need to experience it. And if you have a negative medium or channel, then that's a learning experience, and then you would see it as that. It was very funny. Years ago, I published articles to warn people of mediums, and now I'm involved with what I believe is the number one in the world in Austria.
Yes.
It's really funny, but I tell you an example that may be interest to your readers too.
Right.
Many years ago, I went to one of these psychic fairs, which were very, very common before the pandemic. And there was this older lady. She looked like she was an East Indian woman, but I'm not sure. And what I noticed was people who were seeing her, they wound up crying and left. And so I walked around her, and I went the second day, and I finally thought, well, I'm going to check that out. Why are these people all crying and upset? So I went to her, and she was very mesmerizing. She was also dressed in very unusual clothes, so there was something really interesting about her. And she was telling me that she was able to see that I was about to have a major car accident in the next 3 weeks, and that I need to be prepared. But she said she can help me to prevent that car accident if I meet with her in Vancouver, which is like, I'm on Vancouver Island. I would have to go to Vancouver, meet with her on a graveyard, and she would do a ceremony to prevent me from this horrible experience, which would leave me paralyzed or something. I forgot what it would do to me, but it wasn't very pleasant. And I thought, wow. By the way, it cost $2,000.
Ooh.
So, no, I don't know how many people actually went to Vancouver and to the graveyard to meet with her, but I was so appalled. I cannot tell you. And I was, I was just still exploring all this. Now, this is a pretty extreme case. And I never saw her again. I only saw her once in Victoria. And that prompted me to write articles to caution people and to use their head and to be careful and, all this kind of thing. And so, it's almost comical that I was led with, my stories to go to, at the time, to South Germany and meet with this channel by the name of Manuela. And it took me still half a year before I committed to even translate the information, because I was so programmed to be skeptical and to be careful.
Yes.
that, that I just needed a lot of confirmation. In fact, I went there twice to meet with her again. And then I decided to start my study groups and spiritual study groups and public talks on information that I had translated here in Victoria and also in other parts of the world. But it was not an easy decision because I really wanted to make sure that I don't invest my time and money, because I invested a lot of money to my trips to meet with her once or twice a year. And so I wanted it to be worthwhile, because we have mediums all over the place. There was nothing like it here in my vicinity, in my area, that come even close to the kind of quality of transmitted information. And so that's what I dedicated then my life to. And much of the information is also a part of the Academy's curriculum, which I know is brand new information. And I want this information to be available to anyone who wants to find out about it. And I want it to be available for the next few hundred years. So I have everything, the entire curriculum, ordered properly with numbers, handouts, study materials, and my presentation parts in between, so that anyone who learns this stuff can become a facilitator. And eventually, what I'm looking for is to find a person who is male or female, 30 or 40 years old, who will become the CEO of this organization, has the knowledge, but also a very good business sense, exceptional people skills, and a lot of love for life and for truth.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's just wonderful. Thank you for that. I do have a curiosity, though.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have the car accident?
No, never.
No, you didn't.
No. This was all BS. This was a highly manipulative, dangerous woman who told everyone when I saw later this horrible things that would happen to them, whatever it was, and she could save them if they would come and do her ritual for $2,000. No, I did not believe it at all. I was appalled.
Mm-hmm. And so they prey on the weak and the vulnerable.
Right.
And because you were so grounded in all of these subjects and had so much knowledge and were skeptical, it's almost like you were drawn to her for the reason that you talked about, is so that you could write articles and alert people.
Yeah.
I
think so. It was before the Academy, even. That was years ago. That was probably 30 years ago or so. Then I had that experience. So it wasn't that I had all this knowledge. I think I had sort of an intuitive ability or ability to think things through and to recognize quickly what is fraud and fiction and what is of real value. I think I may have had that already early in life. Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm. How may people reach you?
What do you mean, how many people reach you?
Well, how may people reach you? If they wanted to reach out and find out about your academy, or if they wanted to email you, how may they reach you?
Oh, they can, first of all, they can look at my website, which is, by the way, going to be a brand new one fairly soon, which is very simple. It's one word, metaphysicalacademy.com. And they can just simply write to me at Anneli@metaphysicalacademy.com. And then they can meet with me. I really suggest to meet on Zoom to find out what they're really looking for and if I'm a fit for them, because it's not for everyone, because it is a fair amount of time investment and energy investment. And, people need to be really serious with stuff. It is not a quick weekend course. Mm-hmm. Each module is a year. So we meet once a month approximately on a Saturday from 10 to 3 Pacific Standard Time. And there's homework involved. There's a quiz. It's fun. It's very fast paced, so people are not bored, because when you're here 5 hours, you will say, "Oh my goodness, how am I going to sit there for 4 or 5 hours?" Very fast paced, and there are lots of breaks, short breaks.
Yes.
And it's very, very high energy, and it's also very intimate. As I said earlier, that form are really quite extraordinary, and the acceptance of each other, because we're so different. My goodness, it's sometimes, I wonder, where do these people come from?
Yes.
But it is lovely. I love it. I love to have the range of different life experiences of different levels of education, and do it practical, make it real, make it simple, and at the same time, in simplicity is depth, as you know. And
Yes.
anyone who can learn anything with depth also can present it simplistically. And that is one of the beauty of the program, that everyone can understand it. And if they don't, we ask questions. If I don't have questions, I don't have answers. I want to say, I say I don't have the answer. I don't know. But if I do have the answer, and I have quite a few, then I will tell them. So I have no interest in pretending anything that is not correct or that's not true or not something that I know I can totally share. And I don't also have my ego invested in that, because I see myself more as a friend, as a facilitator, as someone who shares knowledge. I don't see myself as a guru. So that's maybe the difference.
Yes. And so what extraordinary discovery have you found in your life?
Well, the two things, really.
Okay.
One is that I mentioned earlier in our conversation, and that is that I know God exists.
Yes.
And that God exists in a way of, in different ways. And I know that that is not something I can convince anyone of. And the other thing is the discovery of really this source of information that I came across. It's extraordinary. There is nothing in my world, in my life, that had more impact than access to this information source. And I know that may not sound like a lot to people because they don't know, but I have had so many experiences in life. Sometimes I feel like it's 3 lifetimes at least.
Yes.
So many different things I have been doing.
know.
I have been traveling. I have been exploring. I was, CEO of a sales training and sales management consulting firm for 3 years. I had a number of other businesses. I, was doing high-level coaching, and everything led me to what I'm doing now. And
Yes.
to have this information is, I still today often I'm in awe. I know
Yes.
it's so profound.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, why is it me, who had that privilege to develop this and to share it with the world.
Yes. Well, it's very obvious looking back over your background that you've been led and guided, and all the experiences that you've had in your life has prepared you for the Academy. And, you just have a plethora of information and work that you've done, awards that you've won, and books that you've written. And so you're just extremely fascinating and so interesting at so many different levels, because you have, your marketing experience and the work that you did there also provided you for the work that you're doing with the Academy. And so it is extraordinary. Your life is extraordinary. But I know what you feel like when you say you feel like you've lived 3 lifetimes in one, because you're very talented, you're very curious, and because of that, you've just explored so many different things, and you had the opportunity to do it, and that is wonderful as well. And I really thank you for joining me today, Anneli. I get goosebumps listening to you.
Oh, wow.
I wish we could talk as long as we did in our pre-conversations, but anyway, we shall talk again. And so you gave your email address. I wondered if you could give that to our listeners again. And can you spell your Anneli for them?
Yeah, it's my first name, Anneli, which is ANNELI at metaphysicalacademy.com. Metaphysical Academy, one word.
.com. Well, thank you. Thank you to my extraordinary guests this morning. And I look forward to continued conversations with you, Anneli.
Thank you so much. It was a really great joy for me to connect with you, Rhonda, and I wish you all the best for your podcast and for your mission to share good news with the world.
Thank you so much. This is Rhonda Grant with The Rhonda Grant Show, author of Magical Forces Within, Extraordinary Discoveries in an Ordinary Life, inviting you to look for the magical forces within yourself today and every day. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for tuning in to The Rhonda Grant Show with your host, Rhonda Grant. If you would like to find out more information about Rhonda and her upcoming guests and the work that she does, go to her website, rhondagrantauthor.com. That's rhondagrantauthor.com.